Hey there, guys. So it's me, Kate. I am the head coach of the Helios ACL project. I am here as a part of a four-part series. Super excited to give you guys this info, and it's some really important, hard-hitting topics. So I hope you find it interesting. Now, just a little insight. So the reason that this talk is so important today, we're talking about the early post-op period. That's week 1 to week 8. There will be a live Q&A portion. So if you have any questions, drop them below, and I'll kind of start answering questions at the end. So the reason why this is so important is I work with a lot of ACLers, exclusively ACLers, both remote and in person. And the number one thing I see going wrong when I talk to ACLers all around the US, outside of the US, is, the first 8 weeks on the whole are not going right. And ACLers kind of don't actually understand what they should be looking for in their care and exactly what they should expect. So I thought this would be a great way to start the series, talk about kind of what you guys should be looking for, things to go right, things when they're going wrong, so that way you have a good barometer on what you need to do to best make your recovery as good as possible. So kind of before we jump in, I just want to give you a brief overview of some topics we're going to cover, which I posted in the group, but we got to do it here too. So first and foremost, I want to just give you a brief overview of like what to expect in your first 8 weeks. If you have any questions on that, obviously drop it. I want to go over like how to find good care and how to know if your physical therapist is doing the things they should. I want to go over some common mistakes, and I want to give weaning off the crutches its own section because this is a question I feel like I get so much, and I don't really feel like there's a good consensus online of like what criteria you should look at and exactly the best way to do it to make sure that you're not having any adverse effects, which is like when your knee swells, you feel stiff, limping around, that sort of thing. Okay, so when we're talking about the first 8 weeks, I think it's really important to touch on like what even are we trying to do here? So I like to think of it conceptually like the goal overarching of the first 4 weeks is to get your knee quiet. So what that really means is, when they go in, do the surgery, they cause a whole bunch of trauma, right? Not only do they have to fix your ACL if you're getting a reconstruction, but they also, if you're getting an autograft or a graft that's from you, they go in, they cause trauma to that area, and they have to, but now you have 2 injured sites, right? So the goal for the first 4 weeks really is to calm that all down. Now, if you don't calm it down, what happens is usually you see your range of motion being really stiff for months down the line. So it's really important that, I feel like I see it online a lot, people like rushing to get off the crutches and rushing to like move on to more exciting exercises. But doing these first 4 weeks right is like super duper important to setting you up for success throughout your whole ACL recovery. So it's important to know that, although getting off the crutches and moving on to squats, lunges, that sort of things sounds like it's things you want to progress towards really fast, that's not always the case. And it's a really common place where I see people kind of going wrong. So another way we can calm our knee down is avoiding unnecessary journeys. So if you are newly on your crutches, that's not the time where you go and you walk out in the community. It's not the time where you're trying to push yourself to do stairs and stuff super early on. We just want to let that knee settle. Now, icing is going to be your friend during this period. If you have an ice machine, I think those are great. I really recommend doing like 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off every 2 hours for like that first week. And after that, you're at least icing once a day. Towards the end of the day is a little bit better because that way, throughout the day, you're going to get some cumulative swelling, cumulative effects of moving around. And that way, before you go to bed, we're at least calming it down. Too much too soon is definitely the biggest mistake. And I sort of touched on that, but if you are going to a physical therapist that isn't really doing the basics with you right, and they have you start doing like sit to stands. They have you start doing kind of more like weight bearing exercises before you've mastered the basics. That is can create really a storm of inflammation in the joint, which your knee does not like. So, some realistic expectations for your first couple days in rehab would be establishing a good quad set, which this is one, shockingly, as a physical therapist myself, I see done wrong all the time. What you're looking for is that your knee can straighten without moving your ankle at all and without hiking your hip at all. You want to start range of motion exercises. Now, there's a couple different ways to do it and think about it. I don't feel that there's any range of motion exercises that are like preferable to others. You want to find one or two things that you feel like you can do consistently. You want to do them 3 or 4 times a day, really until you get full range of motion. So some ones I like a lot are, in the first week are going to be knee flexion off the table. That's where you support with your other leg. Slowly bring it down, slowly bring it up. Once you get to a place where you could tolerate heel slides, which are with the strap and you pull your knee in, then I would say that one's probably my favorite. As far as establishing full extension range of motion, this is another one that just, people have stiff knees for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they don't get these like basic things right. So this is super duper important. And if you have any questions about what these next couple exercises look like that I'm talking about, I can drop it in maybe a video after the live is done. But so there's something called a backpack knee extension stretch or a low load, long duration stretch. So that's when you prop your leg up, you put a small weight or a backpack on top of your knee, and you hold it for 3 to 5 minutes. Now, even before you're ready for that, like literally the day after your surgery, I'll have people start on something called prone hang. And what I want you to take away from the exercises I'm naming is that you have so much power to impact your knee, even in those beginning stages. So this doesn't have to be something that is given to you by a PT. It doesn't have to be something that you wait for PT for. You can really start this stuff very early on. Obviously, you want to get to a place where you're not in a lot of pain before you start doing flexion exercises. And if you've had a meniscus repair, that obviously needs to be considered. So if you need a little bit of guidance on that, drop the questions below, because you can't bend as far when you've had a meniscus repair for at least 4 weeks. But the point is that you can take this stuff and start right away. It doesn't have to be in the hands of someone else. So like prone hang, which is when you lay on your bed and let your legs hang off your bed with your brace on, you could start that literally the day of your surgery. And without going too in the weeds about specific exercises, I find that the biggest across the board mistake and thing that goes wrong is that either your surgeon isn't telling you or the PT offices can't get you in. You need to be starting this stuff within 2 to 5 days of surgery. So if you're someone that is like calling around for clinics and they like can't get you in until like 2 weeks later, find another clinic, even if it's not the one you want to stay at for like the whole duration of your journey. We've got to be getting that stuff done right away, because you can really seize up and your motion can get stiff pretty quick. And people have different propensities for like scar tissue formation. So the earlier you get this stuff done, the better. Okay, that was a whole bunch of stuff really quick. As far as like questions, does anyone have questions on like why those are your goals or why that stuff is important? If you do, you could drop it below. Otherwise, I'm just going to make sure that I didn't miss anything as far as where people go wrong. So to summarize, starting PT and or exercises within 2 to 5 days of your surgery. A mistake would be putting this recovery in someone else's hands besides your own. rushing to get off your crutches or rushing to do weight bearing exercises before you've established strength at the basics, which is your quad sets and straight leg raises, and not taking it seriously. Why can't you bend as early with meniscus repairs? Great question, Tess. So before we move on, I want to answer this. So when they do a meniscus repair, they put a suture in the meniscus space. So in the early 4 weeks, and every protocol is a little bit different. They're actually getting a little bit faster now. But if you flex beyond 90 degrees, it actually can disrupt the healing of that suture and the healing of those structures. So we want to let your knee have time to actually come in, absorb that suture, and actually facilitate some healing there. So in order to do that, it puts stress on your knee when you flex it too quickly. So it's really just about giving some time for your body to actually heal and not disrupt that area. It's kind of like if you got a cut on your arm or something on the outside and you saw like a scab was forming and you kept like moving or messing with it, it would disrupt how the scab forms. So that's kind of exactly what's going on, but inside of your knee. So if you're flexing it too much in the beginning, you'd be disrupting that area's ability to close and heal. If that's not clear, not enough meat on the bone, just drop a question below and I'll try to make it a little bit more clear. But that's the rationale behind why we don't rush into bending. It's also the rationale why usually when you have a meniscus repair, you're non-weight bearing for a certain period after the surgery, just so everything can kind of chill in there. Okay, so now when it comes to finding good care, I like to think of it as, you're going through this ACL recovery trying to find a partner because it really needs to be a collaboration. This is so different from other types of surgeries. I mean, this could take more than a year. So you don't want just a PT that like seems knowledgeable. You don't want one that's just nice. You want one that's both and works in a clinic that actually can support your goals. So if I was getting my surgery next week, this is what I would be looking for in a clinic. So, and a PT. So as far as personality wise, I want to find someone that is empathetic. I want to find someone that has the time to talk to me about my concerns. So if you're looking around the clinic and there's 7 other people there at the same time, that likely isn't going to be a good situation for you to have the best experience possible. Because I always say with ACL recovery, it's not if you're going to have a setback, it's when. There's going to be ebbs and flows, and that's something we have to expect. So on those days where you're like, oh my God, this just sucks, it's good to have someone that, like if you go and talk to them, they're going to not only have the mental, they're going to care enough to talk about your concerns, they're also going to have the ability. Because if there's a bajillion people in the clinic, I've worked in clinics like that, it is not a situation where that person can hold space for you. So that's like personality wise. Then we want to make sure that that clinic prioritizes you getting in. So if you have to wait every 2 weeks between appointments, if you have to, wait to get in, then it's not a good clinic for you. ACL care needs to be really consistent, and even 2 times a week is like really not enough for ACLers. My remote program does work with early post-op people. If you're finding you're in a clinic that is just not meeting your needs, definitely shoot me a DM. But okay, we're gonna keep going. So as far as, your physical therapist, you also want to make sure that they treat a lot of ACLs. If they only see 2 ACLs a year, or you're looking around the clinic and you're the only person going through this, every ACL recovery is like completely different. So you really want to make sure that they've seen enough that they could say, okay, based on this symptom you're having, we got to do this. Based on this symptom you're having, we can push a little bit in this category. It's all so unique to the person. And you also got to think, every person is coming into their surgery, like depending on the time since your injury, with a different level of strength. You're all getting different graft types. You're all have different training experiences. So it's really important that someone can look at you as an individual and say, okay, this is what your plan is. This is where we have to go from here. Okay, So that's it as far as like ACLs. We want to make sure they're seeing at least like 50 a year if you had to ballpark the number. And that's definitely a question you should be asking them before you even start with them. Okay, and they could fib and not be honest about their skill set, but you should be able to figure that out pretty quick if they don't seem like they know what they're doing. Now, in terms of the clinic itself, so we already talked about some things that are going to be important, like not having it be filled with a bajillion people. Another thing that's important, like when you look around, does this clinic have weights? Do they have weights that are heavier than 50 pounds? Do they have a squat rack? Do they have space for you to do agility? When it comes to ACL recovery, you might not be using this stuff in the first 6, 8 weeks, but as you progress, 8 week and beyond, you really should be lifting and lifting heavy weights. If your physical therapist, one, doesn't lift weights or doesn't even have that stuff in the clinic, then that's a pretty good sign they're not going to be able to support you for your entire ACL recovery. And it might be better just to find a different clinic in the beginning, because sometimes it's not so nice to have to switch around as you go. I just find it's better to have continuity throughout your ACL recovery if you can, being that this might be a year-long journey and you don't really want to bounce around to different people if you don't have to. Okay, so as far as clinic, that pretty much sums it up. The other thing that I feel like is so often missed in really successful or getting ACLers to successful recoveries is like, what is your plan? Was your plan discussed with you? Are they just following a protocol, like a piece of paper, and you don't have an individualized plan? That's something that I really, through the work I do, am trying to help ACLers see, like, a protocol is not enough. You need a plan that's individualized to you and, your goals. So, like, I'll give you an example. If you're going to a clinic, and I know it's only day one, guys. I know we're talking about day one, but we want to find someone that's good from the beginning. If you are a soccer player and this isn't influenced in your program, that's a problem. If you like to boulder, if you like to cycle, if you like to ski, these are all things that should at least be talked about in your plan. Like, what does it look like from where you are day one to get to that end goal, to get to that, peak performance, get you back better than before your injury. And you should know your plan, right? You should know, okay, what does my next 6 weeks look like? What does my next 6 weeks like that look like? And so on and so forth until you get to a place that you're hitting your goals. And even if it's not a super concrete plan, because everything changes depending on how your body responds, because we're all human beings and not machines, it's really important that's at least being discussed with you so you know what you're going for. Like, if you're going for 5 weeks and your exercises haven't changed at all, what is that going to mean in a couple months, Will you be talking? Yeah, I could definitely talk about that. Okay, so do you have any, I'll give some overviews, but if you have any specific questions about pre-op preparation or prehab, you can drop them below. But I'll read the question out loud because I'm not sure if they pop up. Will you be talking about pre-op preparation and prehab? My ACL meniscus repair is 3/5, March 5th, and I want to help my post-op self as much as I can. Haha. Literally fantastic question. Okay, so before we push forward into post-op stuff, let's talk about what happens before. So prehab, for anyone that doesn't know, is the rehabilitation you do before your surgery in order to make yourself as successful as possible on the other side of it. Now, I prefer prehab to be at least 2 months for one very specific reason. When it comes to building muscular strength and muscular hypertrophy, which is laying down new muscle cells, this takes time. At least 6 weeks, most likely 8 weeks. After your injury, something called arthrogenic muscle inhibition happens because your brain senses there's trauma at your knee. So then neurologically, it kind of shuts the quad down a little bit, and some swelling shuts the quad down. So the stronger you can get before your surgery, the less deficits you will have after your surgery. And we can even see this for months after your surgery occurs. people that got prehab actually don't have as big of a deficit, which is exciting. It means there's stuff you could do even before your surgery happens. So if you're someone that's like waiting for your surgery, then there's stuff you can do. As far as actual exercises, this is very person dependent because it also depends like how much trauma happened to your knee. Was there multiple structures like your ACL and meniscus? Was your MCL involved? Was your PCL involved? So it depends upon the degree of instability, but just like general overarching concepts that you should look to get out of it. We want to make sure we're doing some isolated quad strengthening. In the beginning, that's going to look like very basic baby quad activation exercises, maybe some closed chain TKEs, stuff like that. And then you should be progressing to a place where you're actually lifting weights. So that's like the knee extension machine, the hamstring curl machine, actually squatting with weight. That's going to set you up for success. It all just depends upon like where's your starting point. Do you have enough time to get to the heavy weightlifting part? Now, the part that's also exciting, if you have adequate strength before your surgery, typically I'll have people running and doing some of the stuff they like to do cardio-wise because if you're strong enough, you're not going to damage the structures in there as long as you're not having like buckling where your knee is giving out on you. So I feel like people treat their knee very, very gingerly pre-surgery, but as long as you're strong enough, it actually usually is tolerated. And once again, very person dependent. I'd have to evaluate you to really like say what you can and can't do. As far as stuff you should get before your surgery, this is actually something I wanted to cover. So thanks for reminding me, Tess. If you can get an ice machine, game changer. So I usually recommend the Game Ready. You can go on GameReady.com, put in your zip code, and usually they will like pair you with a dealer. Usually rent those by the week. It's a little bit pricey, not gonna lie. So you could go on Amazon also and get what's called, if you look up like cooler ice machine, there's one like Aircast. It looks like a little cooler that you would like bring to the beach. You put it above you, and then the cold water, ice water, will drain down to your knee and ice it that way. That would probably be my second alternative. There's ones you can throw in the freezer. I think it's called like the freeze sleeve, which is like meh, because the second your body warms up, because there's not another source of water or cool water, it gets warm, so it's like less cold time. I would recommend, this is one of my favorite recommendations. Actually, athletes that work with me, I send notes to them, is a fanny pack. So like get a kind of big fanny pack, and even like there's literally ones that are $10 on Amazon. Even if you never use it again after your surgery, then when you're on crutches, it's not super inconvenient to move around. You can like throw your phone, keys, wallet in there. And they're kind of back in, so you'll also look really cool, which I know is super important. As far as like prepping for your surgery, I also recommend like if you can meal prep like the week before your surgery, like throw some food in the freezer, like trays you could just throw in the oven. That also will make it a lot easier because you won't have to cook. I mean, you're gonna feel pretty crappy, honestly. So at least having good nutritious food accessible, the easier it is to access, probably the more likely you're actually going to eat it. So I would recommend doing that. If you want to be like aesthetic and make like nice little things, you could do that too, be my guest. I'm more of a put it in a tray, throw it in the oven, forget about it for 45 minutes and come back later to it type of gal. As far as questions for pre-op, did that cover anything? Do you need any more clarity? If you do, you could just drop it in the chat. Now, something that I also, this is a question I got. So actually, maybe I'm going to save it for later. I had a couple of pre-submitted questions. I'll save it for like the live Q&A portion, even though we're kind of doing that as we go. So some rules to live by after your ACL recovery. Pushing too fast is worse than moving too slow. So, if you have a knee that is swelling up after your physical therapy, after your exercises, at the end of your day, consistently, that is a sign you're doing too much too soon. Now, some post-op swelling is obviously normal. It's going to ebb and flow, right? But it's almost like your compass. So if you do something and your knee swells up a whole bunch, that means you did too much. So we really want to use that as our sign, like red light, green light, yellow light. If it's a little bit of swelling and you go to bed and you wake up in the morning and it's back to normal, okay, carry on. If you wake up in the morning and it's still like a little puffy, stop doing whatever you were doing the day before that made it get like that. Now, it doesn't mean that if they're swelling, something horrible happened to you or is completely wrong. We just want to respect that, our knee is a human knee, right? And it would be really cool if they replaced the part and then you were like, boom, ready to rock. But that's just simply not the case. And we have to respect that, our human tissues take time. It's a neurological injury as well as just a structural injury. Our brain and our ACL need to rewire together. So it's super important that you're not pushing it beyond what your tissue capacity is or what your tissues can take, because that can really make your range of motion backslide. It can really make, your progress actually slower in terms of gaining your strength when you do too much too soon. But I know we're all eager to get back in fight and shape. So I understand like that frustration piece too. Like, oh my God, I did one new thing and my knee freaking swelled up. Totally get it. But just understand that that's your knee going, hey, please slow it down. And is to be at least considered in what you do moving forward. Let's see. So I have like, sorry guys, this isn't very organized because there's so much stuff I have to get to that things just keep popping in my head. When it comes to doing your range of motion exercises, whatever they may be, whether it be, just your standard heel slides, whether it be your low load, long duration stretches to get your extension back, this stuff should be done like 3 to 4 times a day. Now, here's the caveat. If you are having a bunch of extra knee swelling, it's okay to peel it back a little bit. Because remember, we're listening to what our knee says. So understand that like your PT might not give you very clear instructions. That is what you should be doing. If you need more guidance on that specifically, please drop the questions below because I want to make this as beefy with information as possible. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about, the big thing, is how and when should you wean from the crutches and how to do it correctly. Okay, so when you go to a physical therapist, typically they're given a protocol that says like estimated timeline and what you can expect to do at that point based on graft healing time. Now, my big issue as an ACL coach and someone that has worked with hundreds of ACL athletes is that these protocols are super inaccurate to how the human in front of me presents. So most times, I'll check the protocol out just to see if there's anything, red flaggy, meaning like if you had a multiple structure injury, usually at certain times there's going to be certain weight bearing statuses. Basically make sure I don't hurt you. But very rarely do they consider like the criteria. So what will this person's knee look like? What will they present like when they're ready? And that's really a big issue because that's why so many people are progressed to things too fast because they're working with PTs that don't understand the ins and outs of ACL care. And it really is this like beautiful nuanced dance when it's done right, but you've got to be able to actually use context of what the person looks like in front of you in order to progress them safely. So I'm going to give you a little checklist of how to know when you're actually ready to move on from your crutches. So let's talk about what the role of the crutches is and what the role of the brace is. Now, if you are in the UK or Australia, it's actually more rare to be given a brace, which I have found very interesting, being someone that works remotely all over the world, just how they do it. But if you are given a post-op brace, the role of that brace is to protect your knee while you sleep, and God forbid you fall, make sure it stays in one spot. That is its only role, really. The crutch's job is to make sure you don't put too much weight on your foot too quickly. So it's all about controlling forces, the crutches. So if we were to rank the things in their importance, the crutches are way more important than the brace. But what I see happen so many times, just because the protocol says it, is your crutches will be completely discharged, and then it says walk around with the brace. And people that do this and make the decision to do this because it's what their PT has told them are the ones that will struggle with their range of motion for months and months and months and months. This is like the biggest mistake you can make. And I know it's something that's people are instructed to do often, which is why I'm literally here having this talk, because I want to educate you guys on what is actually the truth. So when you walk with your brace and without crutches, it basically, without being fear-mongery, like I literally think about it like a scar tissue factory. Because what happens is you walk with your knee semi-bent in this hibbly-hobbly pirate walk. You circumduct your leg, or you swing your leg around. So then you adopt a pattern of walking, which is neurological, that is really hard to shake. And then you're walking in this semi-bent position, so it causes extra irritation, which is what causes scar tissue formation. And that's not to scare you guys. This is very avoidable, but it's just a big mistake I see literally all the time, so I definitely wanted to address it before we even moved on to the next part. So, how you'll know you're ready to move on from the crutches. You have full knee extension that stays throughout the day. So if you do not have full knee extension, it is not time to get rid of the crutches. I don't care if your protocol says it. I don't care if your surgeon says it. I don't care if your PT, who is the nicest person on earth, said it. If you do not have full knee extension, do not get rid of at least one crutch. Because what that is going to do is create this like storm of irritation at your knee, and that's going to make your strength and range of motion backslide. And I feel like it's like this like badge of honor to get rid of your crutches. Like people are so excited about it, and I'm like, no, the crutches are your friends, guys. They're there to help you. So having full extension that stays throughout the day, yay, keep the crutch, or then you could get rid of the crutches. You need to have all the things on this list. You need to have good quad strength. So what I actually look at is, one, you need to be able to do a quad set. Come on, that's basics. You need to be able to do 20 straight leg raises without extensor lag. So extensor lag is when you go to lift your knee, and if you haven't started your official PT journey yet, you might not be super clear on what this is, but I can always elaborate a little bit later. And that just shows me that your quad is like reasonably strong. What are your thoughts on underarm versus forearm crutches? Okay, you know what I'm going to do? Because next we have the Q&A. I'm going to save that for the Q&A part and just get through the weaning schedule, because it's the same for both forearm and underarm crutches. So as far as those two criteria, those are like the main ones. Your flexion range of motion matters a little bit less depending on the procedure you had. Like more the better, but that's not going to be a determinant, because you're not flexing your knee to full range of motion as you walk around. So extension, quad strength, those are the big ones. Now, what I prefer people to do is actually get rid of the brace, a little bit sooner and continue walking with crutches. If you're someone that has had a meniscus repair, it is very typical for them to ask you to keep the brace and then walk with the crutch or without crutches for like up to 8 weeks, because they want to protect that meniscus repair. I prefer people to keep one crutch at all times if you're walking with a brace. But if that happens to you, and if your surgeon wants that and your PT wants that, don't panic, right? Understand when you come back out of the brace at the end of that 8 weeks, you're going to have to bring the crutches back. So don't throw them away until we can get a normal gait pattern. So a normal gait pattern means a heel-toe gait. you're flexing your leg up and placing it down, striking with your heel without any weird things happening. And those are what the crutches are best for. Okay, so as far as how to wean from crutches the right way, I like to create a weaning schedule for people I work with, and it typically goes like this. Once we decide together that you're ready to start to wean from the crutches, you're gonna start with like 30 minutes. You're not gonna just throw them away and go about your life. You're gonna start 30 minutes just walking around your house, right? You wanna be somewhere that if you were tired or having some pain, you could sit down. And then we always look at what happens in the 24 hours following that with the knee swelling, with the stiffness. So if your knee gets super stiff after or it swells back up, that means that, hey, we're not ready for that. That's okay. We just keep using one crutch. One crutch, walk around, come around with us so that way we're not causing excessive forces at your knee. So usually I'll do 30 minutes on day 1 hour on day 2, 1 hour on day 3, and then you bump it up an hour every 2 days until you can make it like 6 hours without any increased swelling or stiffness at the end of the day. Once you can do that, you're ready to get rid of your crutches. So this can take like 2 or 3 weeks, and that's okay. Because remember what our goal is. Our goal right now is to keep your knee quiet so that you can build strength and adequate mobility going forward. This like first 8 weeks is really all about setting the stage to give you a bomb-ass recovery moving forward so that when it's time to get to the gym, do squats, do knee extensions, all that awesome stuff, your knee is ready for it. So we're setting the groundwork. This is a really common place that people go way too fast and they just say, oh, I'm cleared without crutches, boom, I'm just gonna walk around. That is not the way to do it. So just to like reiterate. So starting with 30 minutes, if no swelling, we move forward, then an hour without the crutches. So you're still using one crutch for the rest of the day. Then we progress to 2 hours without the crutches. No swelling, okay, next day, 2 hours without the crutches, so on and so forth until we get to a place where our knee is happy bearing weight. Now, throughout your rehab exercises, you might be doing stuff where you're not using the crutches. That's okay. It's just that when you're walking outside of PT, this is like other 23 hours of the day. This is where we want to be using that weaning schedule. So I'll oftentimes actually not count their PT session in those like 2 hours if we decided 2 hours without the crutches is what we're doing. If that's any bit unclear, please drop a comment below. Okay. Now, as far as other things I wanted to bring up, I think that's pretty much it. So I have a bunch of pre-submits for Q&A, but first I'm going to get to Tessa's question because if you're first in line, we go to you first. Okay. What are your thoughts on underarm versus forearm crutches? So I don't think that one is preferable to the other, but I know you're getting meniscus repair, or they might do a meniscectomy, which would mean that they just shave out whatever is torn and it doesn't change your recovery. If they choose to do a repair, I would go with the underarm crutches because it's easier if you have to be non-weight bearing and you can move around faster. This is super variable. It's almost like crutches there's like definitely a skill in using them. So like if you happen to be better at one versus the other, like who knows if you are, I don't know if you go around like testing out different crutches. It's not like buying a car where you test drive other cars. If you go to the medical supply store and they have both, try both out. But in the US, I'm not sure where you are, I think pretty much 90% of people get underarm crutches. But there's no real difference in how much they unweight your feet. I just feel like, if it were me, I probably would go with the underarm crutches. But that's just preference. So there's not going to be one that's like better, I think. Okay, next question, Tim. we're in the Q&A portion, so we don't have to wait, Tim. On the scar tissue front, I'm a week post-op with a meniscus root repair, partial meniscectomy, and ACLR. I'm locked in a brace for 4 weeks. What can I do? What can I do to prevent scar tissue issues or optimize recovery in general? Muscle scraping, compression with HyperIce, Normatec boots. Okay, fantastic question because I think so many people are probably going through a very similar thing. Okay, first and foremost, right? When I say you need to get your knee moving in the first 3 days, that's not necessarily true if you've had a multi-structure injury. We still want within the first 7 days, but your knee isn't going to spontaneously combust because they did a lot of work in there, right? Multiple structures. They shaved out some of the meniscus. So I understand that preventing scar tissue is something that would be really like top of mind. Things that you are allowed to do would probably be ankle pumps. Those are pretty basic. As far as getting into PT, I don't know if you have been yet, but I would go as soon as possible. Like, if you don't have a place, call around today, see who has treated ACLs, multi-ligament injuries, and get in pronto. As far as your range of motion stuff, you're not going to be allowed to flex your knee beyond 90 degrees. So don't worry about the flexion range of motion. What we want to be concerned about in these first 4 weeks is getting your extension range of motion. So as far as like what can you do, I always recommend something called prone hang. If you can't tolerate that, like roll a little towel up, prop it underneath your ankle, and just chill like that. One of the biggest mistakes people make on the scar tissue front, I can't believe I even forgot to say this earlier in this live, is putting a pillow underneath their knee. Guys, if you put a pillow underneath your knee, I will be so angry with you. That will make your knee be stuck. Now, the reason that is because it's putting you in a semi-bent position, even though you're locked in a brace, right? You might look at your knee right now, like you could tell it's not completely straight, even though it's locked at 0, because those braces don't like force our knee into any certain range of motion. But if you put a pillow underneath your knee, that would be a mistake. But to put, for like 3 minutes, put a little towel roll underneath your heel, see if you could tolerate it, so that we're stretching the extension. Overall, like when they do multiple structures, there's a whole bunch of swelling in there, so that's going to stop your range of motion from progressing too quickly and probably shut your quad down a little bit more. That's okay. Use ice literally as much as possible during this period. Ice is nice. All right, so if you can get your hands on an ice machine, definitely preferable because they have compression. If you have like access to Normatec boots, sometimes I'll like put ice packs in there and then put people's legs in them. Although it's like a lot of stuff, I'll squish it in. I think like overarching, like broad strokes, I'm not a big advocate for muscle scraping because it doesn't actually do what we think it does. I obviously, like, I'm a physical therapist. I work in person and I work virtually. And what working virtually with ACLers has taught me is really those like bells and whistles, like you don't need them. You need really laser focused basics, honestly. So if you are doing the basics and you're doing what has been assigned to you, whether it be low, long duration stretches or like the flexion range of motion, you're good, right? So don't panic too much. Right now, focus on eating well, focus on icing really as much as you need, and use those crutches and don't rush it. I know those are kind of vague, but it really is that simple when it's done right. Okay, we got another question. Oh, I love this. I'm getting a patellar graft for my ACL. Oh, by the way, Tim, if you need any more clarity, just drop it below. I'm getting a patellar graft for my ACL reconstruction. I've heard it's the most painful since the bone has to heal. I've also heard that months, years after recovery, they have pain when kneeling. Is there something to do during the initial recovery to help avoid pain in the future? This is a great question. So, like, kind of like we touched on before, like when you have an autograft, which is a graft from you, they actually create two injuries. So, managing graft site pain is something that we have to consider. Now, as far as like treating the patellar tendon pain, at some point in your recovery, you're probably going to have a little patellar tendonitis. All patellar tendonitis is your patellar tendon gets weaker because of the piece they took out of it, which, like, duh, that has to happen. But it doesn't mean you're doomed to a lifetime of pain. As far as what you can do to avoid it, you're gonna go through a period where there's some tendonitis. It kind of happens. I find that people with patellar tendonitis, I tend to have continue their straight leg raises at least as a warm up for a little bit longer, because that helps strengthen your patellar tendon. And then once you get to a place where you can tolerate weighted exercises, we're going to have you do things like isometrics, which are a way to strengthen your tendon, and we're going to have you do some eccentric movements, which are like slow loaded movements, maybe like a hack squat or things that ask of the patellar tendon. But it's all kind of like your rehab and rehab in general is like a crescendo. So at different points, we have different goals. So immediately post-op, calm the situation down, then we start the build. And I almost think of it like brick by brick, right? So like in the first couple, and now of course I'm talking big picture. Oops, this is supposed to just be early post-op. So brick by brick. So first we're laying down our foundational strength. We're isolating here. We're not rushing to lunges. We're not rushing to squats. We're just making sure our muscles can fire, and we're loading those movements we can tolerate. Then next brick, we start to bring on some functional stuff. So that's squatting, lunging, adding some weight on our back, moving with weight. Then from there, we do that over a longer period of time till we get our strength up to a decent place. Then we start to work on power-based exercises, which is like the neurological wiring, how quickly can you produce force. So when we look at that full journey, what that means for you, Tess, is that, we know that your patellar tendon is going to start stressed out. You can, in the beginning, really make sure you get the basics right and make sure you're not being progressed too fast in any of those foundational bricks till we build to a place where you can reach your goals and do whatever activities are meaningful for you. So really, like, you can't avoid pain 100%, but you can do this really smart, and you can work with someone that understands your goals and is reading your body signals. And I think that would be the most helpful to you. There's no like, if you do this one exercise, it'll never happen, which would be really cool. But unfortunately, that's not the case. Once again, a little bit vague. I don't know if you guys are picking up on the fact it depends so much. Okay, we got a question from Chris. If that wasn't clear, Tess, just drop it below. I'm 7 months post-op from ACL meniscus repair, hamstring graft. Everything's good except I get a clicking motion from full extension and releasing it. What kinds of exercises should I focus on? I'm doing PT at least once a week and diligently going to the gym on my own as well. So Chris, if you could just drop a little clarity for me, is this, when you say full extension, do you mean when you're doing things like a knee extension machine, or when you're like walking around and try to super straighten your knee? Because it's kind of two different things. But first, while you type that, I'll kind of talk broad strokes. Knees are noisy creatures. Noise by itself is not inherently pathological. It's not inherently bad. But it does mean that your quadricep likely isn't controlling where your kneecap is in the groove super well. The thing is, if it's not painful, I actually wouldn't worry too much about it. But if you want to, like, the stronger your quad is, most likely the less that's going to happen. But like, also, if you had a hamstring graft, we know it's not because of the graft site. It most likely is just because your quad isn't super duper strong yet. Now, if you're looking for specific exercises to get your quad strong, it really depends on what your strength is. So that's where the value of like a really thorough assessment comes in, where someone is actually like exposing what your deficits are, testing them, so that we know, okay, like based on the data we have, this is most likely causing some of your symptoms, and that's kind of where we need to go with it. Um, as far as strengthening, are you able to tolerate some like loaded movements just yet, Chris? I'll wait a hot second before moving on. But just like broad strokes, clicking isn't really, your knee's gonna make some crunchy little sounds. It's kind of okay as long as it's not painful. Um, but it just shows us that like at full range terminal knee extension, your quad probably needs a little work. So that's where I would focus on. The actual mechanics of that depends on your strength. Oh, walking is good. Even when I'm doing activities, my knee is fine, no pain. Okay, so then most likely it's not something that's pathological. If it bugs you, like DM me separate and maybe we could try to problem solve through some of the stuff you're specifically going to. But if it's not pain going through, if it's not super painful, then your knee will not spontaneously combust one day. You're good. Okay, Tiffany, when you refer to swelling and maintaining a calm knee, what does that necessarily look like? I mean, should the involved knee be down to regular size at 4 weeks? Okay, this is super, super variable between what people, because it depends on how much work they did in there. So I never go based on like time from surgery. We always have to use context. So as far as keeping a calm knee, that means to me minimizing the amount of excessive force on your knee while your tissue capacity is down. Because there is one reason why injuries happen, it's because force exceeds tissue capacity. So the surgery itself really decreases your tissue capacity. And it's normal. You guys know, you come out with a chicken leg, and you're like, whose knee is that? So it also makes your knee look like knobbier, and that's normal. So if you've had a meniscus involvement or multiple structure involvement, it tends to not look like the other side until, or mostly like the other side, until you establish good quad strength and communication with your quad back. So that means you need to be doing loaded quad exercises. So at 4 weeks, very unlikely you're going to tolerate that. We just want it to be as minimal as possible, and like whatever your baseline swelling is, we want it to float around there or less as the weeks go on. So as far as like an actual timeline you should anticipate, like usually my athletes start tolerating loaded knee extensions around like week 6 to 8. So like a couple weeks after that. So no, it's not gonna look super normal by week 4, and that's okay. We're just trying to minimize it as much as possible. So if that was unclear, drop a comment below. I'm gonna start answering some of my pre-submitted questions, but if you have any other questions, drop it down below. Okay, how do you feel about using a knee brace during your ACL recovery? Now, in this context, there's like 2 types of knee braces that we really see. There's like the later stage one that you wear during sports, and then there's that big old chunky one that's like immediately post-op. So this is a great question because my opinion's definitely changed on this. It's not as important as you think, which was, as a new grad PT when 6-7 years ago, I would have been like, no, it's the most important thing. But then you learn that actually its only role is to like stop you from doing crazy things if you sleep crazy, and if you slip, prevent your leg from going the wrong direction. I think that, in the first 2 weeks, yes, 100%, use it, love it. It protects you. But after that, once you start to establish good quadricep strength and hamstring strength and calf strength and hip strength, it becomes less important. I don't think there's like a right or wrong answer. I think depending on the context is really important here. How long until swelling goes down enough for it to look like my normal knee? So this is kind of the same as who just asked me that question? Tiffany. I'll kind of reiterate, like, there's no timeline that's the same for everyone. What I don't want is that, like, you do your rehab and then it gets super duper swollen after. So we're looking for like a steady, slow decline. If it's looking like gets better and the swelling goes up, gets better and the swelling goes up, that's when we're like, hey, maybe you're doing too much. And then this is a pretty general question. I feel like we already got to this. Oh, I'm going to answer Tessa's question. Why is there muscular atrophy after surgery? Does it really just start going away rapidly after surgery because you're non-weight bearing? They talk about how important it is to get quad activation after, but I'm just confused how they're all related during the trauma of this surgery. Tess, you are on fire today because these are all fantastic questions. Okay, so this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because I think it's so interesting. Okay, now this is like part of this is cutting edge research, part of this is stuff that we already knew. So when you disuse a muscle or you're immobilized, which happens, after ACL surgery, your brain becomes less efficient at using information that is sent to you from your knee. Okay. At the same time, there's something called AMI, which is also called arthrogenic muscle inhibition. So when your body has a trauma that occurs to it, in this case, there's the initial injury, and then there's the surgery itself. When that happens, your body is so smart. Your nervous system is always in protection mode. The red alerts start going off, and your knee starts to send messages to your brain that, oh my God, something crazy just happened. Because no one told your knee it was getting surgery. It was minding its own business. Then the laparoscopic robot arms came in and started messing around in there. So your body is like, holy absolute cannoli, something just happened. Oh my God. In order to save ourselves, shut the ship down. So, from a neurological perspective, your brain is less good at using information from your knee because of the injury, and there's some evidence that it actually starts occurring before. I know this is Banana Town. Might be some indication of why high-level athletes and people that have never been injured in their life suddenly get an ACL tear. That could be its own whole life, so I'm not even going to go into there. But, so our brain is less good at using that information. Our knee now the nervous system is shutting it down. In addition, when there is swelling at your knee from the surgery itself, that's less than 5 milliliters, it turns up the dial on the inhibition or like the neurological shutoff in order to protect yourself. So this is a response that is meant to help us, but it's basically your nervous system going way overboard. And that's why it depends upon the degree of swelling. And that's why I won't shut up about how important it is to manage your swelling, because the more swelling there is, even on a transient basis, the more your body is going to say, not safe to use that muscle, gotta shut it down. Okay, so in addition to that, right, there's a muscle called your VMO, which is your vastus medialis, which is your inside quad muscle. Even with just 5 milliliters of swelling, the guy shuts down. So that's why it's so hard to get your muscle to fire again. It's this whole neurological process. So that's why you go to get surgery and like immediately you're like, what happened to my leg? It looks like a chicken leg. I was strong 15 hours ago. It's because your body is literally sending red alerts that there's a crisis going on at your knee. It's not just from disuse. Then on top of it, now you're not allowed to put weight on your leg. So now it's not getting stronger, and it's this whole process. Now it needs to happen because we have to fix the ligament, and you wanted to fix all the structures in your knee for your long-term success. But that's why it happens. So it's basically a neurological process that's meant to protect you that goes a little bit overboard. Now, as far as the degree of AMI, there's no like scale to measure AMI or the inhibition. However, just in my experience, I've definitely seen that there are some people that this persists for way, way, way longer. I would hypothesize that those are the people that have greater cortical smudging or like brain involvement in their process. Now, I know we're getting super sciencey here. I didn't want to go this sciencey, but it's just, I think it's so interesting because I've had people like high level athletes that like their quad is just on strike. And we can do all the right things for months and months and months, and we just have to wait for their body to figure it out. There are some ways that we can improve this connection, which is really interesting. So taking away visual input when you're doing stuff like your quad activation actually helps rewire the connection. So I don't know if you guys I think there's some like variability in how long in the process people are, but like when you first start doing your quad sets, like you have to stare at your knee to make anything happen. And then as time goes on, you're taught to like keep staring at it. And that actually makes your brain visually dependent in order to activate your quad. So like little tipski here. Once you get your quad to activate, stop looking at it. Literally look up, do mental math in your head, recite the alphabet, think of your favorite ice cream flavor. Don't stare at your knee because that actually can further that inhibition down the line. So that's a little nugget for you there. As far as questions, that's all I have. It has already been an hour. I will hang out for 2 more seconds if anyone has questions, but shout out to everyone that came today. My name is Kate. I'm the founder of the Helios ACL Project. Follow me on socials. I'm going to be monitoring this post for a couple days to kind of go over any questions people have. I do remote rehab with ACL athletes from day one until you reach your goals. So if you happen to get some pretty not good rehab and you want to find some actual rehab that gets you to your goals, hit me up because there's nothing more on this earth I love to do than help people get back after their ACL surgery and injury. So if that's all we got, yeah, that's it. I will be returning next week at the same time. We're going to start our return to running talk, which is an even deeper subject, I think, than day one stuff. So have a great day, guys, and I'll see you next week.